There is something about an interview gone wrong that has always entertained me. Whether it's the interviewer, the interviewee, or both, it can be the weirdest type of conversation train wreck, and it's recorded so you can relive it again and again. So when musicians get interviewed, sometimes it gets rough quickly. Some musicians don't want to be there, some are intoxicated, some are just awkward, or the interviewer is a jerk. This is just a fun look back at some pretty awful moments in rock history. This is not a top 10, no ranking, just a list. YouTube links for these individual interviews I've posted in the video description, and these interviews can be weird. That's all you need to know. You know how these videos work, let's get to it. Every now and then, an interviewer on a program is not well prepared to run an interview with a guest. Happens in all mediums. The problem gets worse when the interviewer tries to fake what she knows to the point of just guessing what the person's name is and not having any idea which band is for. Also doesn't help that this was MTV. For starters, the interviewer didn't know Rivers Cuomo's last name, so she just tried to fake it, calling him Rivers Weezer.
Hey, yo, everybody, bizarre high time here, and I'm here with Rivers Weezer. So tell me, how do you feel at this wonderful festival with such a brilliant sunshiny day?
I feel fine.
A little awkward. It got worse though, because at this point Rivers definitely didn't want to be there, and who can blame him? You can pretty much see the indifference and the disdain as the conversation goes on.
Feel comfortable? Could you imagine living in something like that for a limited time?
Yeah, I could imagine it.
They had to clip in a lot of live footage as opposed to Rivers just staring into the distance. The fact that this aired is just a miracle, especially when it gets to questions like this.
Drive a car.
I haven't had a car since I was 17, but...
In a 2-minute segment, over 1 minute of it was just live footage, and the rest was this awkward in-van interview. This was at Bizarre Fest in 1996. Yeah, bizarre is a fair description of what's going on here.
And did you enjoy driving?
I actually did enjoy it. I think I'll get a car.
From one type of awkward to another, I for one have no problem with a comical or intentionally goofy interviewer as the one doing the interviewing, especially when you know it's part of the bit. The problem comes when someone doesn't know that it's a bit and thinks you're either rude or insane. Nardwuar was definitely in a rough position when erratic and aggressive Dave Rowntree kept bullying Nardwuar by taking off the interviewer's hat and glasses to throw them around while he was trying to ask questions for the interview.
Would it be okay to stand over there? Come on. Stand there and ask your question.
It also didn't help that Damon Albarn was not up for games and got quite sick of everything around him at that point.
If you could please, Dave, acknowledge who's behind you right now. Well, I will do right now. Who are you?
You know who I am.
You're Alex.
That's right.
So Alex of Blur, who invented fish and chips?
Who invented poo?
Some answers were eventually given after more awkward bullying, but it wasn't anything worth hearing. Blur would issue a public apology, and the drummer blamed it on his ongoing drug issues.
Who are you?
My name's Damon Albarn. Who are you?
I am Nardwuar, the Human Serviette. Damon, who do you have with you?
Why do you call yourself it?
Who else do you have in the group with you right here? Who is the gentleman that just took my hat? That's a nice smile.
All right, Dozy Bollocks, how you doing?
It's roughly a 5-minute cut-up clip with a bully, a band who didn't care, and a really awkward situation. Credit for Nardwuar for not breaking character and trying to wring that drummer's neck.
You happy?
No, I'm not.
You don't look happy.
I am not. I want my hat back, please. Okay, there we go.
Every now and then you get a musician stepping in to interview another musician. MTV would do this occasionally to get extra eyes on, and for the most part it would work well. Most part. At Lollapalooza in 1994, an innocent Billy Corgan of the Smashing Pumpkins had to interview a not-so-innocent Nick Cave. If you're thinking you got ugly, you were totally right, because Nick Cave does not hold back.
Nick, how did you get involved with Lollapalooza?
Well, my manager rang me up and told me that I was going to do this. I've done this same interview with, are these your questions?
These are not my questions, Nick.
Right.
I take no credit for them.
So Nick Cave didn't like being asked the same set questions that Billy was visibly reading off of a sheet. Yeah, I can see that taking the joy out of the conversation quite a bit. Billy Corgan tried to joke about every other country being the same outside of the United States. That also doesn't help to someone who's not from the United States.
Yeah, well, we're not English.
I apologize. Australian, I'm sorry. But you are identified with England. You did move to England, yes.
It ends with Nick Cave saying Corgan has the mentality of a teenager. Billy fumbled around that also.
Australians, Germans, English people. We have an American person.
To all us Americans, it's, you know, it all looks like one country.
Yeah, well, it's not. It's not.
I know. I'm sorry, I'm just kidding.
This is what happens when an awkward person interviews a person who doesn't want to be there. I hope this interview is studied by future journalists and broadcasters on how to avoid awful situations with preset questions and to, you know your guests beforehand.
You're not a teenager.
I know I'm not a teenager. No, I'm saying the mentality.
You have the mentality of a teenager.
Absolutely.
If an interview gets canceled last minute, it can cause the interviewer or entire program to scramble. When you prep for Freddie Mercury and Queen and they cancel, that's a huge loss. So then you get the Sex Pistols as an offering, who are still being introduced to the world. That's when you get a nightmare. This interview features Bill Grundy and the Sex Pistols revolving around everyone saying they are drunk and then it quickly spiraling out of control.
Not the nice, clean Rolling Stones. You see, they're as drunk as I am. They're clean by comparison. They're a group called the Sex Pistols. And I'm surrounded now by all of them. Just let us see the Sex Pistols.
Grundy kept trying to provoke the band and the Sex Pistols by joking around by how much they got paid in their record deal. The band got fed up pretty quick.
I am told that group have received £40,000 from a record company. Doesn't that seem to be slightly opposed to their anti-materialistic view of life?
More the merrier.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Well, tell me more about it.
Fucking spent it, didn't we?
Well, suppose they turn other people on.
It's just their time for it.
Which one?
Nothing, a rude word. Next question.
No. What was the rude word?
Shit.
Grundy then, for lack of a better description, gets a little creepy with the ladies.
Are you?
Yeah.
That's what I thought you were doing.
I always wanted to meet you.
Did you really?
Yeah.
We'll meet afterwards, shall we?
You dirty sod. You dirty old man.
The band knew that Grundy had been drinking, and in under 3 minutes, Grundy looked really awful and not having a clue what to do with this group of people. The studio staff were urgently trying to cut away and end this as soon as possible. I love that the Sex Pistols came into the studio for this. This is literally it also. Sex Pistols aren't exactly saints in any fashion, but keep in mind that when the Sex Pistols look more like coherent ones and the victims of this, you messed up.
Saying nothing else about him. We'll be back tomorrow. I'll be seeing you soon. I hope I'm not seeing you again. From me, though, good night.
When interviewing a band, you can know about the group, know the music, know the touring, have all the research and information ready at hand, and everything still fall flat because the people being interviewed don't know how to have normal human interactions. The Stone Roses are the perfect example of this. I don't know how else to sell this dreadful interview than by just showing this clip.
What's the best thing that anybody's ever said about the band then?
Ian? Don't know.
I had to speed some of that up. You're welcome. This interview is over 15 minutes, and it's only these responses, along with Ian Brown and John Squire, sitting there smoking and looking confused.
John, do you think you're talented?
Yeah, I'm alright.
Many people argue this interview was great and it was a bit. Even the interviewer was in on it. Okay, if it was a bit, why did it take 16 minutes and the questions actually be things people would want to hear?
In the interview that you wish you'd really been asked that you haven't covered?
I never wish to be asked anything in particular, really, no.
The Stone Roses tell all in this shocking interview. If you can make it through this whole thing without looking away, then you deserve some type of award. I can't describe this interview properly for how uncomfortable it gets.
Yeah, but you always say that you expect to be the best band in the world, so...
No, we know that we are. We don't expect anyone else to think anything in particular about us. They can think and do what they want.
Well, if you're the best band in the world, why aren't you number one?
Because the record isn't out yet.
Why wasn't your last single number one, or why wasn't the
It takes
album
time for
number one?
people to get, you know, acquainted.
One thing I've noticed about bad interviews is that when an interviewer is a huge fan of a group, they will sometimes think they can joke around and poke fun with the band as if they are close friends. If they actually know each other, that's one thing, but it's another thing when you finally get to talk with them and you rip them apart right from the beginning. The Bee Gees were releasing a new album in the late 90s and were aiming for a comeback. Clive Anderson did not take long for the low shots to start.
And you've been some highs and lows? Well, mostly highs in your case, but...
More highs than you can imagine.
Now, what was that? Because that's perhaps the most distinctive thing now, that high-pitched...
Oh, the falsetto.
That's it, yes, yeah. Were you working with Mickey Mouse at the time?
There are points where music and plans are discussed in this interview, but other times it's just snark and quick insults before the questions.
Because we all have the same sense of humor. We just have fun.
Because I didn't realize you were real brothers. I think you were sisters, actually, but
In under 10 minutes, there are so many quick jabs from Clive Anderson that it's to the point of some of the brothers noticeably getting fed up.
And then we moved on to Wee Johnny Hayes and the Blue Cats, nobody admitting to being Wee Johnny Hayes.
No.
And then in the last sort of, before we became the Bee Gees, we were late tossers.
Yes.
Which we thought was...
You'll always be late tossers to me, but I don't know.
Around 9 minutes of this, and the Bee Gees just walk off the stage. They were done. I can't say I blame them. If this was an old improv game from the original Whose Line Is It Anyway, then it's the worst one ever. Make an awful improv interview where you insult the guests.
Oh, I've never had anyone walk out before, but...
we are a tosser, pal.
So anyway...
everybody.
Ozzy Osbourne has had many interviews over the decades of his career where he is either clearly intoxicated or so tired that he can't form a sentence. It's rare, however, when you also get in under the influence Zakk Wylde sitting right next to the man who is losing his mind while Ozzy gives what appears to be stoned answers. Stoned answers are the best way to describe some of these replies because Ozzy does not really understand much, and then Zakk is losing it.
Called the magic plane. I think somebody got it's all to do with this drugs and alcohol rehabilitation. I think someone's still taking drugs and alcohol somewhere.
At one point in this short clip, they called their plane a bus and then a boat, and then laughter ensues. I think even the interviewer might have been giving something from the other two.
Not on this bus? No, not on this boat. No, this is clean. I'm clean for once. Isn't that nice? Have you guys...
Zakk Wylde legit becomes an astronaut, he's so high, and then the interviewer starts asking about toilet paper. Ozzy said he even brought his own toilet. Headbangers Ball was a different form of entertainment back then.
Yeah. Now, of course, the question before we get into the next video is, did both of you... I don't know if Zack's still with us or not. Did both of you bring your own toilet paper? Oh yeah, and our own toilet.
It's short, just a brief catch-up interview as Ozzy tours the world. It's worth seeing though just to watch Zakk Wylde on another planet as the interviewer tries to talk. Again, Headbangers Ball and 80s MTV in general was something different.
It's just driving me insane, that's what it is. We got lots more to come here on the Headbangers Ball.
When you know a rock star is already having issues and is after the peak of his career, it can make that interview a bit sad, especially when the rock star is drunk in the morning on a TV show set where they splice in a drunk man trying to figure out Hold'em and answer questions about absolutely anything. Enter Scott Stapp. When Scott Stapp was promoting some of his solo work after Creed, he went on Casino Cinema, and right off the bat with the introduction, you could tell it was going to be all sorts of sad.
For joining us here, you know, Beth, how are you, man? Good to see you.
We met.
We kissed.
So, you know, like, the deal was, man, it was like, you know, I felt like people needed to, you know, like, know what was up.
That woman he took by the back of the head and neck was Howard Stern's wife. The host was an actor on The Sopranos. Scott Stapp offended both of them.
Dave Grohl got a little Dave Grohl from the Google Dolls.
Dave Grohl, you got a little you know, my son thinks babies come from my sack. And so, you know, I just have to continue on with that theme that, son, my babies do come from my sack.
Then it gets to Scott Stapp yelling about former band members being bitter and Beth Stern not having bitter boyfriends and much, much worse.
You wanted to try my ass? I said, Scott Stapp is crazy.
Are they bitter, the rest of the band?
Of course they're bitter. Are your ex-boyfriends bitter?
No, I'm friends.
Bull.
I am. I don't
want to. Then it was a bunch of yelling and nonsense sounds while the host tried to tell the audience to stay tuned for Kickboxer.
to register yourself online.
That's what I'm talking about.
Kickboxer right here on Spike TV. He said, Dave.
Scott Stapp has dealt with sobriety on and off for years now. Never forget, however, that he is one of the best-selling singers in American history. And I think Howard Stern still wants to beat him up.
Called me to say the things about the Lord. You know what I'm saying? Like he called me to bring the plate of God into the house of the Lord.
You're gonna have me drinking. This is unbelievable. That's what. That's Stapp, the Great Divide. The guy sold 50 million CDs. 50 million. Baby. Thanks for stopping by, man. It's a real pleasure.
When you get a big TV spot, it can do wonders for a career. When you already have a set career, you may not care as much about professionalism. If you're Iggy Pop, you never cared about professionalism or a big TV spot in the first place. I commend anyone brave enough back in the day to try to have a normal discussion with this man. Years ago in Australia on the show Countdown, Iggy Pop couldn't even wait for an introduction before being himself.
One album.
Hiya, Dogface.
Iggy, how are you, mate? Listen, welcome to the show.
Not only was an interview chaotic with a clearly distant Iggy Pop, but the interviewer had to keep trying to get him to focus.
Tried a couple of years ago, live in concert. What's wrong? Don't you see me? You behave yourself. With David Bowie, he's had a lot of influence on you, I gather.
Yeah.
And can you answer these questions properly?
Then came some awkward discussion about David Bowie, which led into Iggy's performance of a song to a studio audience, to which they had to just play the song over it because Iggy was so bad that he couldn't even try to sing at some points. I truly feel bad for anyone on set that day trying to get that man to calm down. And for all the great things Iggy Pop has accomplished in his career, my favorite memory is him scooting around on stage to a confused young audience in Australia. Let's go back to 1979, where Kiss were riling up audiences everywhere. Nothing but big stages and big sales for years, to the point of overexposure and hating each other. It got to the point where in a sit-down interview with Tom Snyder on the show Tomorrow, Ace Frehley had a few too many pre-game drinks. Or pre-interview drinks, I guess. It was easily noticeable that Ace had way too many and was enjoying his life.
But you're kind of like a spaceman, huh?
No, actually, I'm a plumber. On the side.
Listen, I got a little...
This interview is over 30 minutes. This show was nothing but drunk laughing and Gene Simmons looking like he wanted to smack Ace upside the head.
Half the equipment. Oh, I see there's a live human being over there. Half the equipment is right here.
The only space bear in captivity. I got him, he's captured.
Captain Biff.
Okay. Space bear.
How are you, Tom?
I'm all right, thank you. In your own.
This was a big turning point for Kiss, as there were two sides now. Gene and Paul versus Ace and Peter. Ace and Peter would only be in Kiss for a few years after this Halloween special of Tomorrow. Gene Simmons later made a comment about the interview saying, "It may seem funny that someone's drunk, but the fact is, the root of it was, I believe, a contempt and lack of respect for the audience and the fans."
Don't do it.
I'm not doing anything.
Also, do you realize how messed up wasted you have to be for Gene Simmons to want you to tone it down a notch? That's a wake-up call if I've ever heard one. There are many trash interviews out there, but I have to say, these are still memorable. Do you know how many interviews I used to do where it was difficult to even get two-word responses out of musicians who did not know how to talk? I have hours of wasted interviews on hard drives from rock and metal musicians who are either too awkward to have a conversation or even promote their own music, or clearly don't want to be there. I get that media is sometimes part of the job, but I would rather take drunk laughing Ace Frehley over, yeah, no, answers for 10 minutes straight.